So Obama's talking about all of this with the global warming and that, and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax. Will it go back like this? I mean, will it change back? Probably. That's what I think. I believe it goes this way, and I believe, yes, man, meaning us people, man and women, to be politically correct, but because everyone says man, but now we have to add women to that one too. Man and women, we do have an impact, but I don't believe the impact is nearly what some say.
That wouldn't make.
I'm not denying climate change, but it could very well go back. You know, we're talking about over millions of years. They say that we had hurricanes that were far worse than what we just had with Michael.
Who says that? They say. I mean,
people say that in the...
Yeah, but what about the scientists who say it's worse than ever?
You'd have to show me the scientists, because they have a very big political agenda, Leslie.
I can't bring them
An economy based on wind. I never understood wind. You know, I know windmills very much. I've studied it better than anybody. I know it's very expensive. They're made in China and Germany mostly. Very few made here, almost none. But they're manufactured tremendous, if you're into this, tremendous fumes, gases are spewing into the atmosphere. You know, we have a world, right? So the world is tiny compared to the universe. So they make these things, and then they put them up. And if you own a house within vision of some of these monsters, your house is worth 50% of the price. They're noisy, they kill the birds. Why is it okay for these windmills to destroy the bird population? And that's what they're doing. Why is it okay for these windmills to destroy the bird population? And that's what they're doing. You see these magnificent fields, and they're ruined. And you know what they don't tell you about windmills? After 10 years, they look like hell. You know, they start to get tired, old. You got to replace them a lot of times. We're doing it right. And, you know, our numbers environmentally right now are better than they've ever been before, just so you know. Because I'm an environmentalist. I am. I want the cleanest water on the planet. I want the cleanest air.
President Trump has taken unprecedented action to roll back several environmental protections over the past year.
He has repealed and weakened regulations that protect water, air, and land. And this includes repealing the Obama-era Clean Water Rule, weakening protections for endangered species, and loosening rules that limit pollution and carbon emissions.
CBS News meteorologist and climate specialist Jeff Bergelli joins us now. Jeff, good to see you.
What the agenda of the administration is, which is to roll back as many environmental regulations as possible, which in their view is pro-business, right? Trying to kind of kickstart the economy, make it better than it is, create more jobs. No one argues that that's a bad thing. Those are short-term gains for probably some very long-term consequences. By getting rid of a lot of these environmental regulations, we're going to see more pollution, we're going to worsen climate change, and we're not taking that leadership initiative that the United States has always taken on so many issues around the world. In fact, we're ceding that leadership to other countries around the world when it comes to climate change, which could be one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue facing us
millions,
as we head into the
literally,
future.
of children around the globe demanding action for climate change. What's your message to world leaders today?
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. And yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? The popular idea of cutting our emissions in half in 10 years only gives us a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees and the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control. 50% may be acceptable to you, but those numbers do not include tipping points, most feedback loops, additional warming hidden by toxic air pollution, or the aspects of
Our planet's future is in the balance. Antarctica's ice, the Amazon rainforest, Russia's permafrost, and ocean currents have all been identified as tipping points in the Earth's system. Today, the scientist that first described them warns the majority of them are now active, showing signs of tipping over.
The climate situation is both high risk now and urgent, and in my view that's the definition of an emergency, meaning if we carry on the way we're going, we are indeed going to cross some damaging tipping points in the climate.
Tipping points are any part of the Earth that can be pushed from one state past a point of no return to another.
1989 was the last time we saw 350 parts per million. And it appears that 2016 will be the last time that CO2 has dipped below 400 parts per million. And what the heck is 400 parts per million? What does that even mean? Well, we know from the analysis of ice samples from Antarctica that before the Industrial Revolution, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was about 275 parts per million and had been this way for thousands of years. Something has increased the number from 275 to 400. We're quite certain that that is due to the human activity of burning fossil fuels.
I take these satellite measurements and the variation over time of how the world is changing as facts. We've seen this warming over the last century and a half, very, very meticulous measurements, and it shows a really sharp acceleration in the warming over the last 4 decades.
People have a hard time understanding what's a big deal for a planet that is warmer by a degree or warmer by 2 degrees Celsius. But the impacts that we're worried about are being triggered not at a 20-degree warmer world, but they're being triggered at a 1-degree warmer world.
Over the last decades, we've seen the ice melting. We've seen the ice melting at the North Pole. We've seen the ice melting really fast on Greenland, where it's falling off Greenland into the ocean.
We've had Pacific Islands that have already had to be abandoned because of sea level rise. We can combine our data with global climate models and say, how is sea level going to change over the next 5, 10, 15 years? because if we continue on the path we're doing, there's going to be a lot of coastal communities all around the world that are going to be flooded.
As scientists, we're just taking the most precise data that we can. It's open data, it's factual. For instance, the enormous droughts and fires that we have around the world are directly related to a warmer planet. That has a huge impact on people. It's unprecedented.
If you have a warmer atmosphere that can hold more moisture, because that's what warmer atmospheres do, they can suck up more moisture, that means more convection, more big thunderstorms, more hurricanes, more extreme weather. That's one of the likely outcomes of a warming world. We've built our civilization around the current climate, our coastal cities, our food resources, our water resources. They're all pegged to the current climate, and there's not much slack in the system.
We're already seeing impacts, and impacts are going to increase. In a 2-degree warmer world, there'll be more. And in a 3-degree warmer world, there'll be even more. And when you're looking at those kind of scenarios, 3, 4, 5 degrees warmer, which are totally plausible, if we go down that path, we will be looking at a different planet.
Christine Todd Whitman is a Republican, a former New Jersey governor, and under President George W. Bush, ran the EPA.
One of the most troubling things about this administration on the environmental side is this disregard of science. They're gutting science across the agencies, across the departments, across the government.
All of this with the global warming and that, a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax.
When we see this kind of profound shutting down of the transportation sector, so much of industry and the broader economy, that does indicate that a lot of critical pollutants are dropping in their concentrations on the order of 30%, say, in some major cities. So we see the air quality rapidly improving in those places. That's a quick, if potentially temporary, response. Week or so of the Bay Area and California, for example, going under a lot of these restrictions, air quality improving by 30% or so. So these are significant. We have seen what look like reductions of 10 to 30% in Northeast China and the industrial part of northern Italy over as short as like a few week periods, as we started to see the virus really hit and some of these restrictions on people's movement and industry going into place. So the numbers are another path, and really the more effective path in terms of moving the dial is moving towards more energy efficiency and less carbon per unit of economic activity. I think another really interesting question is related to how vulnerable we are as a society to shocks. And I do worry that as we think about climate shocks, whether it's simultaneous crop failures in multiple regions, or a year where we have a big fire season in the western US and a big hurricane in the east, are we as resilient as we think we are, even in the areas that don't get directly affected, right? Because we're all connected, and we just sort of assumed that we wouldn't break the bank, whether it's insurance funds or having enough emergency responders. Our hospitals, obviously, we're learning, are more vulnerable than a lot of us realized.
What would you peg the odds at of whether or not this actually leads to a long-term societal change when we do, get to the other side of the pandemic stage of this?
Right now, we're seeing this huge drop in activity and travel, for example. When we get through this terrible crisis, and as you say, we will people replace that lost activity? Are we just going to buy up all the things that we didn't buy during that time? Even if we don't do that, will we just kind of return to the activities of the past? Because really, to reduce our emissions, we need major changes. So then you get to some interesting questions, right? Like, are people maybe after this going to say, hey, video conferencing has improved a lot. Supervisors are more understanding than they used to be. Maybe I won't drive into work 5 days a week in the future. Maybe I won't have to fly to so many conferences, speaking, myself as a climate scientist. If we turn the dial enough, if we as a society respond to this crisis in ways that mean over time in the future, 5, 10, 20 years, we reduce our emissions a lot, that's where it can be decisive. Then we can stabilize the greenhouse gas concentrations, maybe even get to a point where we're pulling more carbon into the atmosphere than we're applying, and we can start to see some climate recovery. That's the hope, but it's going to take ambitious action.
Climate change, yeah. Will it go back like this? I mean, will it change back? Probably, that's what I think. I believe it goes this way, and I believe, yes, man, meaning us people, man and women, to be politically correct. But because everyone says man, but now we have to add women to that one too. Man and women, we do have an impact, but I don't believe the impact is nearly what some say. Global warming and that, a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax.